The movie of the Clinton Revolution was inspired by the events in the American Revolution. The American Revolution was the first major political and ideological revolution of the modern sphere. The American Revolutionary War allowed for Britain's 13 colonies to gain political independence from its imperial motherland. The war resulted from decades of growing tension between the British Crown and its forced influence on the Americans. This war included many different types of warfare that the British were not used to, such as guerrilla warfare, which allowed for the Americans to make great strides against the British. Many countries came to support the Americans as they did not want the British, a great empire, to have any more power. And those efforts of support ultimately led to the Americans to their successful win and the British surrender at Yorktown. The Boston Massacre is one of the greatest debates during the American Revolution, where people to this day are still debating whether it was an act of murder or an act of self-defense. In March of 1770, a patriot mob attacked a British loyalist on King Street in Boston. The British then fired a gun at the mob, which ended up killing a boy and led to a group of 9 British soldiers versus 300 or 400 Americans who were verbally abusing them. The British ended up shooting 5 of those people to their death, and the Americans publicized it as a massacre in favor of their revolutionary games of propaganda.
The Boston Tea Party was a political protest that happened on December 16, 1773 in Boston, Massachusetts. It began when the American colonists were frustrated with Britain for imposing taxation without representation, and they dumped 342 chests of tea imported by the British East India Company into the harbor. The event was the first major act of defiance to British rule over the colonists, and it showed that Great Britain and the Americans would not take taxation and tyranny, and that they were willing to rally the American patriots across to fight for their independence.
The Declaration of Independence is the document signed in 1776 that officially records the proclamation that the United States is a separate nation from Great Britain. The Declaration of Independence states 3 basic ideas that, number 1, that God made all men equal and gave them the rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Number 2, that the main business of the government is to protect these rights. And number 3, that if a government tries to withhold these rights, the people have the right to revolt and set up a new government. This declaration set forth the American Revolution and allowed the country to have a surge of nationalism and unification.
The Battle of Yorktown was a final marking of the conclusion of the American Revolution. This event occurred from September 28th to October 19th of 1778. During this time, the joint Franco-American land and sea campaigns trapped a major British army on the peninsula at Yorktown, Virginia. This final military act of the Revolution forced the British to surrender and virtually ended all military operation in the American Revolution. The British General Lord Cornwallis forfeited to George Washington's troops after Washington was able to work the French Navy to defeat the British, which allowed for the victory to happen. These 5 events are all you need to know to effectively watch, comprehend, and enjoy the film, The Clinton Revolution. Thank you for your time, and we hope that this movie is everything you've wished for.